The Zeldar Dominion had conquered over 2,000 star systems, crushed over 100 fledgling civilizations, and executed more species than history had the memory to count. They did not ask. They did not negotiate. They took what they wanted, studied what they found useful, and discarded the rest like refuse into the void. To them, humanity was no different, just another primitive race fumbling with rudimentary spaceflight, a species with no empire, no interstellar fleets, no real claim to anything beyond their own polluted rock. High Chancellor Gorvax had already moved on from the decision by the time the command was issued. Acquire several human specimens for analysis, he had instructed, barely looking up from his personal console, where he was calculating the logistics of his next planetary invasion. A simple order, one of thousands issued that day. No one, not the Chancellor, not the Dominion's high-ranking warlords, not a single soul aboard the fleet of extraction vessels, had any reason to believe this would be the one mistake that would unmake an empire. The extraction team moved efficiently. The humans, as expected, offered no resistance. 2 biological entities were captured in a single swoop, one mature female and a younger male, both taken from an urban dwelling. The human male had been preoccupied with some sort of electronic device, barely looking up before a stasis field wrapped around him. The female had lunged toward them, shrieking words the translation matrix initially failed to parse, something about ruining her goddamn evening. No matter. They were tagged, transported, and secured in a containment chamber aboard the Dominion's primary research vessel. Then things began to unravel. Karen Johnson had lived in Brooklyn for over 40 years. In that time, she had dealt with landlords who could make intergalactic despots look tame, survived rush-hour subway rides that defied the laws of physics, and raised a son who had once set their microwave on fire because he wanted to see if aluminum foil really sparked. There was nothing in this universe she could not handle. She sat against the cold metallic wall of the containment chamber, arms crossed, her face set in the expression of a woman waiting to speak to a manager. Her son, Jimmy, sat beside her, legs stretched out, drumming his fingers against his knees. "Okay," he said after a long moment. "So, first question. Are we going to talk about the fact that we just got abducted by aliens?" Karen exhaled sharply. "You realize I had a lasagna in the oven, right? A good lasagna, Jimmy. Homemade sauce. Ricotta, imported from Little Italy. It was going to be perfect." Jimmy turned his head slowly. "Right. So the alien abduction thing is, what, like third on the list of concerns here? I swear to God, if they don't put us back before it burns, I'm going to find their boss and—" The door hissed open. A figure entered. 7 feet tall, cloaked in dark ceremonial robes with gilded sigils. Its skin, a shade of deep obsidian, was sleek and ridged with bone-like protrusions along its elongated head. It gazed down at them with sharp, calculating eyes, a predator analyzing prey. Karen gave it a once-over and exhaled. "Oh great, a 6-foot bug. What do you want, sweetheart?" The creature tilted its head. Then it spoke. Its voice was deep, resonant, its translator adapting quickly to Earth's linguistic structure. "You are specimens of the species Homo sapiens. You will answer our inquiries." Jimmy blinked. "Oh my God, I was joking about the whole Star Wars background character thing, but you guys actually look like something from a deleted scene." Karen sighed, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, we don't answer to randos who show up uninvited. It's rude. You could have at least called ahead." The creature's gaze narrowed. "Your cooperation is not requested. It is required." Karen rubbed her temples. "You see, this is why people hate customer service. No social skills." The alien's nostrils flared, its patience thinning. It gestured to a control panel embedded in the chamber's wall. "This device has scanned your biological structure and deemed you surprisingly resilient. Your species appears durable, adaptable, though intellectually primitive." Jimmy raised a finger. "Question, if we're so primitive, how did we make you do the talking in English first?" A slight pause. The alien's gaze flickered. Karen grinned. "Oh, that's right. Primitive my ass." The creature straightened. "You will provide information about your species' weaknesses. your military capabilities, your biological vulnerabilities. Karen leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. And what happens if we don't? The alien's posture shifted ever so slightly. Then you'll be disposed of. Jimmy let out a breath. Right. So, fun follow-up question. Do you guys have any idea what you just did? The alien tilted its head again, confused. We issued an ultimatum. Jimmy nodded. Uh-huh. See, that's your first mistake. You don't issue ultimatums to my mother. Karen cracked her knuckles. And you definitely don't mess with my kid. The alien regarded them for a moment before turning toward the exit. You have one rotation to reconsider. The door slid shut. Karen leaned back against the wall, crossing her arms. Well, this is annoying. Jimmy rubbed his face. Okay. Let's think about this. We're in a hostile alien prison, no weapons, no way to escape, and they just threatened to kill us. Karen exhaled through her nose. All right, then we do what we do best. Jimmy hesitated. Which is? Karen grinned. Piss them off so much that they regret ever looking at us. It took 12 hours for the Zelvar to realize their mistake. By the end of the first hour, Karen had shouted at 5 different guards for not letting her speak to someone in charge. By hour 3, Jimmy had reverse-engineered their translation matrix by rapidly cycling through pop culture references that the AI struggled to keep up with. By hour 5, Karen had somehow convinced one of the technicians that their species' greatest warrior was a man named Chuck Norris, and that humanity's dormant combat potential would activate the moment they were sufficiently angered. By hour 7, the guards were no longer making eye contact. By hour 10, the ship's AI had been forced to disable internal comms because Karen's extensive complaints about the prison's interior design had been automatically transcribed into an official incident report. By hour 12, the execution order came through. High Chancellor Gorvax did not hesitate. These humans were not worth the headache. The prisoners were brought to the execution chamber. A high-profile broadcast was initiated, standard Dominion procedure for discouraging rebellion. The 2 humans were brought to the center of the chamber, where a high-energy disintegration array awaited. Karen surveyed the scene. Real fancy setup. You do all your murders like this, or are we special? Gorvax, standing above the chamber on a raised platform, sneered. You are vermin. Your deaths will serve as a reminder of the Dominion's absolute authority. Karen sighed. Sweetheart, I have spent years working customer service during the holiday season. I promise you, I've been threatened by scarier things than you. Jimmy leaned toward the executioner. Hey, quick question, before we die, do you guys have Twitter? The executioner hesitated. What? Because I guarantee this is gonna go viral. The execution commenced. The human prisoners were vaporized. The broadcast reached every Dominion-controlled system, an example made. A warning delivered. Unfortunately for the Zelvar, it also reached Earth. And that was the end of the Dominion. They just didn't know it yet. The footage spread like wildfire. At first, people thought it was another internet hoax, some elaborate deepfake cooked up by conspiracy nuts. Then NASA. Then the UN. The world held its breath as the cold, unforgiving reality set in. This was no fiction. Aliens were real. They had taken 2 of Earth's own. And they had killed them. The transmission had been intercepted from multiple sources. Dominion warships, overconfident and arrogant, had broadcasted the execution across interstellar frequencies, ensuring every vassal race in their empire witnessed their power. What they failed to realize was that the signal had also bled into the electromagnetic spectrum of a small blue planet with a population of 8 billion primates who did not take kindly to public executions. Karen Johnson's last words were etched into history before the first retaliation strike was even planned. Oh, you just pissed off the wrong species, buddy. For 1 full minute, Earth stood still. Then, in perfect synchronization, humanity lost its collective mind. Governments did not convene. There were no closed-door meetings, no deliberations, no diplomacy. The decision was made in an instant, not by politicians, not by world leaders, but by the people themselves. The internet exploded first. Reddit ignited in a digital war cry. XCLTHAR delenda EST. Twitter burned with trending hashtags. Hashtag retribution. Hashtag bring hell. Hashtag alien screwed up. Memes flooded every platform. A clip of Karen chewing out the Zeldar captors was looped over an image of General Patton. The entire forum of r/military had changed its banner to a simple, unambiguous phrase, and no survivors. But the rage wasn't just online. It was real. It was tangible. The United States activated DEFCON 1 for the first time in history. China mobilized its entire space initiative overnight. NATO forces received an order that had never been written in the handbook. Prepare for interstellar war. There were no debates. No countries set out. The European Union, Russia, the African Union, South America, every single nation that had ever squabbled over borders and resources threw everything aside. The species had been challenged. The species had been wronged. The species would respond. It took less than an hour for the world's most classified projects to be dragged into the light. The black budget operations, the experimental weapons, the secret fleets that had never been acknowledged in the public domain. Humanity had been preparing for an eventuality like this for decades. Not for war necessarily, not for conquest, but because, deep down, humanity had always known. They had grown up on stories of invaders, of monsters from the stars, of existential threats beyond the safety of their atmosphere. Warhammer, Starship Troopers, Independence Day, Halo. Science fiction had never been just fiction. It had been preparation. And now, the training wheels were off. The newly formed Terran Armada, a coalition of Earth's greatest military minds, convened in orbit above the moon. 50 warships, hastily retrofitted, repurposed, and armed with bleeding-edge railgun technology, hovered in formation as admirals, generals, and world leaders patched into a single, unified command frequency. A 4-star general, known to the public only as Big Iron, stood at the helm of the USS Valkyrie, the first human dreadnought-class warship. Its hull plated with stolen alien alloys reverse-engineered from decades-old black site crash retrievals. He surveyed the bridge, his cigar unlit but clenched firmly between his teeth. He was old school, built like a steel beam. His voice gravel dragged across gravel. When he spoke, it was not to address a single nation. It was to address the species. They killed Karen fucking Johnson. His voice, rough as shattered glass, carried across the entire fleet. They took our people. They broadcasted it like it was some kind of goddamn entertainment special. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sit right with me. A low murmur of agreement swept the command deck. He continued, Earth has a lot of history, a lot of ugly history. But if there's one thing we've always been good at, it's making the bastards who mess with us regret it. His knuckles cracked as he clenched his fists. So here's how this is going to go. We aren't sending diplomats. We aren't sending warnings. We aren't opening negotiations. He turned to the tactical display, where a rotating wireframe of the Zeldar Dominion's central outpost flickered, its location triangulated from the execution broadcast. We are sending a message. And that message is simple. You don't fuck with Earth. The command room erupted into cheers. Humanity's first war, beyond the stars, had begun. The first engagement lasted 47 minutes. It wasn't a battle. It was an annihilation. The Zeldar outpost at the fringes of their empire had been operational for nearly 2 centuries, its defenses considered impenetrable. They had prepared for the possibility of rebellion, of minor uprisings from lesser species. They had not prepared for humanity. The first kinetic bombardments rained down from orbit, striking with such precision that the planetary shields barely had time to register the impact before they collapsed entirely. The Zeldar had never encountered railgun technology before, not at the speeds humanity had perfected. Their plasma-based weaponry was advanced, yes, but it relied on energy grids that could be overloaded. And humans? Humans did not play fair. EMP warheads crippled communications before the first landing parties even touched the ground. Shock troopers, clad in newly developed exo-rigs that tripled their strength, dropped into the battlefield like avenging gods. Sergeant Jake Big Guns Reynolds was the first man off the dropship. He had been waiting for this moment. A decorated war veteran, a man who had seen combat in every hellhole on Earth, Reynolds was not just a soldier. He was a symbol. He had watched the execution footage on repeat. He had memorized Karen Johnson's last words. And when he landed, his boots kicking up alien dust, he broadcasted her words over the loudspeaker of his armor. "Oh, you just pissed off the wrong species, buddy." And then he opened fire. The Zeldar broke within the hour. Dominion forces, accustomed to fighting enemies that cowered and surrendered, found themselves overwhelmed by an army that did neither. Humans fought. They fought dirty. They fought ruthlessly. They fought like a species that had spent thousands of years perfecting the art of organized violence. By the end of the assault, not a single Zeldar combatant was left standing. Earth took its first victory. The galaxy noticed. Galactic empires that had once scoffed at humanity now watched in stunned silence. The Zeldar Dominion, a force that had reigned supreme for over 500 years, had just lost an entire planetary garrison in under a day. The Zeldar themselves scrambled to respond. High Chancellor Gorvax dismissed the loss as an anomaly. "The humans are an irritation," he sneered to his advisors. "Nothing more. We will crush them before they become a true problem." But the War Council was uneasy. Humanity did not fight for conquest. They did not fight for resources. They fought for revenge. And that made them unstoppable. The next wave of human ships was already on the move. The Zeldar had made a mistake that could not be undone, a mistake that would cost them everything. High Chancellor Gorvax had never known fear, not when he had overseen the extermination of the Trelvanni colonies, not when he had stood on the ruins of the Almeri homeworld, listening to the wails of its last survivors. Not even when he had ordered the execution of the human prisoners, confident in his empire's power, assured that their species was insignificant in the grand design of the Dominion. But now, with the lights flickering in the war chamber, the crimson glow of emergency sirens pulsing through the halls, and the terrified murmurs of his highest warlords filling the air, he felt it. The humans were coming. No, that wasn't accurate. The humans weren't coming. They were already here. His talons scraped against the surface of his command console as he stared at the strategic map of Dominion space, his mandibles tightening as he took in the unthinkable. Zeldar Prime, the heart of his empire, was under siege. Humanity had not wasted time with diplomacy, with negotiations, with the pleasantries of warfare that other species adhered to. There had been no warning, no ultimatum, no attempt at peace. They had gone for the throat. 7 of the Dominion's most fortified worlds had fallen in under a standard galactic cycle. Entire fleets had been erased from the star charts. Warships that had once patrolled the galaxy unchallenged now drifted as lifeless husks, gutted from the inside by boarding parties who fought with terrifying efficiency. Even the Zeldar's most elite warriors, the Dreadborn, had failed to hold the line. They had underestimated human resilience. They had underestimated human rage. The Chancellor's second-in-command, General Corzan, stepped forward, his bony exoskeleton chipped and battered from the last desperate retreat. His voice, usually steady, wavered. "High Chancellor, our forces are in full collapse. The human fleet advances faster than our tactical models predicted. They do not behave like any military force we have ever encountered. They do not retreat. They do not falter, and they do not take prisoners." Gorvax clenched his jaw. That, more than anything, unsettled him. Even the most ruthless conquerors had limits. The Dominion had enslaved countless civilizations, but they had never committed to total annihilation. There had always been survivors, either to serve, to be studied, or to warn others. The humans left nothing. Entire garrisons had been wiped from existence. Zeldar distress signals went unanswered. Civilians who had once jeered at humanity's insignificance now cowered in fear, whispering the name of their executioners in hushed, trembling tones. Terrans. There was no battlefield etiquette, no adherence to the rules of war. When Zeldar warships attempted to surrender, humanity responded with kinetic bombardments that shattered their hulls into dust. When Dominion governors offered ceasefires, they were met with silence. Then orbital strikes that reduced entire cities to craters. This was no war. This was vengeance. The war chamber's holoscreens flickered, shifting to display the newest incoming fleet. The humans had arrived in full force. The Valkyrie, their flagship, led the charge. Dreadnought-class warships, bristling with planetary bombardment, weaponry broke from slipspace. Their darkened hulls illuminated by the glow of Zeldar Prime's artificial sun. On the planet's surface, anti-orbital defenses opened fire, lancing bright beams of energy toward the incoming armada. It didn't matter. The first volley from the Valkyrie silenced them. Railgun slugs, moving at velocities the Dominion's defenses could not intercept, struck with pinpoint accuracy, reducing entire strongholds to flaming wreckage. Zeldar Prime, a world that had stood unconquered for over 500 years, was burning. And the humans were just getting started. On the bridge of the Valkyrie, General Big Iron stood with arms crossed, his steel-eyed gaze fixed on the battlefield unfolding below. His officers worked around him, but there was no rush, no sense of urgency, only the quiet, methodical precision of a war machine in motion. Planetary defenses are down, an officer reported, voice level. Ground forces requesting final assault orders. Big Iron chewed on his unlit cigar, considering. Then he turned to the holographic transmission feed, where a single incoming request flickered. It was from the High Chancellor himself. The silence that followed was filled with unspoken satisfaction. "Put him through," Big Iron said, voice a low rumble. The hologram materialized. Gorvax appeared, his regal armor dented, his expression strained, but still clinging to the last remnants of authority. "Human leader," he began, his voice heavy with forced composure. "We acknowledge your strength. We recognize your fury. But surely you see that this destruction is—" "Nope," Big Iron interrupted. Gorvax stiffened. "What?" Big Iron rolled the cigar between his fingers. "I don't need a speech, Bug. I don't need excuses. You know why we're here." Gorvax bared his fangs. "You cannot destroy an entire empire over 2 lives." Big Iron's expression didn't change. "Watch us." A shudder ran through Gorvax's frame, the weight of inevitability pressing down on him. He had ruled through strength, through intimidation, through absolute, unchallenged power. And yet here, now in the face of these creatures, he understood what it meant to be helpless. The Zeldar Dominion had faced rebellion before. They had faced uprisings. They had faced resistance. But they had never faced humans. He took a slow, measured breath. We surrender." Big Iron didn't react at first. He simply let the words hang in the air, letting the admission settle, letting the weight of it suffocate the last vestiges of Zeldar pride. Then he exhaled, rolling his shoulders. "Nah," he said. Gorvax blinked. What?" Big Iron leaned forward, eyes like molten steel. "You didn't offer surrender to Karen Johnson. You didn't offer mercy to Jimmy Johnson. You didn't think twice before showing their execution to the entire goddamn galaxy." Gorvax's mandibles quivered. "This is different. This is the survival of an entire species." Big Iron's gaze was cold. So was theirs. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, he gave a signal. The orbital bombardment began. High above Zeldar Prime, the sky ignited as the first wave of kinetic strikes slammed into the planet's surface. Explosions rippled across the capital city, consuming once proud spires in an unrelenting cascade of fire and metal. The Dominion's homeworld, the seat of its empire, the very heart of its dominion, was being erased. Gorvax's transmission flickered, static distorting his form as tremors shook the war chamber. His voice was raw now, panicked. "Stop this. Stop this. We surrender. We surrender completely." Big Iron exhaled slowly. "Now that's what I was waiting for." He motioned to his communications officer. "Patch this through to every surviving Zeldar warlord. Every colony. Every fleet." A second later, Gorvax's terrified face was broadcasted across the Dominion's networks. The once mighty Chancellor, the architect of 1,000 conquests, was now a broken creature, his voice cracking as he uttered the words that would define the future. We surrender. The Zeldar Dominion is no more. The feed cut. A deep, satisfied silence filled the Valkyrie's command deck. Then, Big Iron turned to his officers. "Tell every Zeldar remaining," he said, voice even. "We'll be back in a year." One of the lieutenants frowned. "A year, sir?" Big Iron nodded. "If I don't hear that every single Dominion world is paying reparations, if I don't see them acknowledging Die Hard as the best Christmas movie ever made, and if I don't hear at least one Zeldar warlord singing Never Gonna Give You Up in perfect English, then we finish what we started." He turned, striding toward the viewport, where Zeldar Prime continued to burn. "This," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else, "is what happens when you mess with Earth." The war was over. Humanity had won. And the galaxy would never forget. The war ended, but the echoes of humanity's wrath lingered across the stars. The Zeldar Dominion, once a colossus of conquest, had been shattered, its fleets reduced to debris, its rulers broken, its legacy burned from history. What had taken 5 centuries to build had been undone in a matter of months, crushed beneath the unstoppable march of an enraged species that had never once fought for empire or dominion, only for vengeance. The galaxy trembled at the aftermath. At first, the other empires refused to believe it. The Council of Elder Races, a coalition of the oldest and most influential civilizations, had convened in emergency session, their grand hall brimming with frantic voices. The Kelvani, a species that had ruled vast sectors for millennia, whispered in hushed tones. The Silax Consortium, infamous for their cold efficiency, reanalyzed their war simulations, searching for an anomaly, a calculation error, anything that could explain what had just occurred. But there was no mistake. The humans had done the impossible. They had wiped out the strongest empire in the known galaxy, not through careful diplomacy, not through strategic alliances, but through sheer, overwhelming force. No species had ever fought like them. No species had ever won like them. For the first time in known history, the seat of power shifted. The galaxy's greatest rulers found themselves staring at a simple, undeniable truth. Humanity was now in charge. It didn't matter that they had no formal empire. It didn't matter that they still considered themselves a fractured species, divided by borders and ideologies. The truth was plain to see. Earth had unified for war in a way no other species had ever imagined possible. They had turned their entire planet into a singular, relentless force, and the weight of that revelation settled like a lead weight upon the entire galactic community. The message had been delivered. Earth was not to be trifled with. The survivors of the Zeldar, scattered remnants clinging to the last vestiges of their once great civilization, understood this more than anyone. The species had been spared, but only because humanity had allowed them to live. And humanity made sure they never forgot it. The terms of surrender were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. First, reparations, massive, crippling, and non-negotiable. Every remaining Zeldar colony was forced to surrender its resources to Earth's reconstruction efforts. Their wealth, their technology, their very culture was now subject to human oversight. Second, recognition. An official, galaxy-wide declaration that the execution of Karen and Jimmy Johnson had been an unforgivable crime. Statues of the two were erected on former Zeldar capitals, permanent memorials to the species that had nearly damned itself. Third, humiliation, because vengeance was not enough. Every surviving Zeldar warlord was required to participate in a live broadcast, reciting in perfect English the words that would haunt their species for generations. We solemnly acknowledge that Die Hard is the greatest Christmas movie ever made. The galaxy watched. The galaxy laughed. The once mighty Zeldar, who had ruled through fear, were now a joke. And humanity? Humanity was legend. But war, for all its victories, left scars. Big Iron stood at the edge of the reconstructed USS Valkyrie's command deck, staring out at the void beyond. The stars, once symbols of the unknown, now seemed smaller, dimmer. They had been conquered, claimed, turned into battlefields where the echoes of war still hummed beneath the surface. Humanity had changed. No one called them the new rulers of the galaxy. There had been no formal declaration, no coronation of a Terran empire. There didn't need to be. The other civilizations simply knew. They didn't dare speak of it, but their actions betrayed the truth. Trade routes subtly shifted toward human control. Diplomatic negotiations now included an unspoken factor. What will Earth think? The great interstellar banks began accepting Earth credits, once considered worthless outside their own system. Human music, movies, and literature spread like wildfire. A Kelvana senator was caught binge-watching Breaking Bad. The Silax homeworld's top-rated restaurant served something called a New York cheeseburger. The influence was silent, but it was absolute. Humanity did not rule the galaxy, but they owned it. And every species knew one thing for certain: never mess with Earth.